more. You have to go beyond actually what is necessary to fix the FBI, because that's not going to be enough to get the rest of the American population back on board. And so how does he do it? It's one word: transparency.
I was going to ask you, where does transparency come in, and how much transparency do we need at this point?
We need as much as we can get. And you heard Chairman Jordan mentioning that. You're already seeing that out of Director Patel. So it's very simple. Congress has an important oversight role. When Congress asks for documents that the law requires the FBI to provide to Congress, then the FBI needs to do that. And I think Director Patel has already shown that he gets that and that he's delivering.
Are there any other mistakes that you think Director Wray made as opposed that Director Patel needs to avoid?
I mean, it'd be that right there. So I think Director Wray had a tendency to shield information, to drag out responses. I think towards the end of his tenure, he kind of became a little smug and kind of put out to be here to be asked questions. And I think that's the entirely wrong approach. The FBI director or whoever's designees that he sends here needs to be highly responsive to you, because you have a job to do, and they need to provide you all of the information that the law requires them to provide you right away, no delay.
And I think initially, Mr. Whitson, that transparency may be a little painful for the FBI, but I think in the long term, that's what it's going to take to restore the credibility of that agency. Mr. Stout, what do you believe the role of the FBI is?
Very simply, I think we need to eliminate the bloat. There's too many senior executive service members in roles with limited utility. They need to eliminate or demote non-essential roles and align headquarters with more field-based leadership models. So the more emphasis we put in the field will be will have a greater output, greater response to crime and anything that involves the American citizens.
Do you believe it's possible for the FBI to return to those roots?
Yes, sir, absolutely. Men and women of the FBI are some of the best people that I've ever worked with. They're honest people. They have families. They can transition well, and with enthusiasm.
Gotcha. Ms. Parker, you said in your previous testimony, over a course of the 12-plus years of service, the FBI's trajectory kind of transformed. What do you mean by that?
I joined the FBI. I was a witness to the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York City when that occurred, and I went on to join the FBI because I wanted to give back to our country. I wanted to serve America, and when I joined the FBI, that's really what we were doing. There was very little talk about politics. You just went in, you did your job. I was originally focusing on white-collar crime. I then transferred over to violent crime. But as I mentioned, there really did become two FBIs, and the weaponization and the politicization started seeping into the agency, and it was a common topic of discussion, and you were bombarded with requests to work certain investigations, and it just became overwhelming. It was only one side of the political spectrum that was ever being held accountable. And so FBI agents were thinking, why are we doing this? We're supposed to be, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind. Lady Justice is no longer blind. And for me, I just started seeing over and over examples of politicization. And that's not what I signed up for. You know, when I witnessed the 9/11 terrorist attacks and I wanted to serve, that's not what I signed up for. I wanted to stop violent criminals and terrorists.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm out of time. I'll yield back.
Thank the gentleman. And now I'm going to recognize the gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member. Mr. Parker, Ms. Parker, after serving your country as a special agent for the FBI, you landed in a soft, cushy position as a paid contributor at none other than Fox News. Isn't that correct?
Actually, that was not correct. When I initially left the FBI,
you're not a contributor.
I am at this point, but when I left the FBI, I was not initially a paid contributor for Fox.
But you are a paid contributor now.
Today I am, but when I left the FBI, I was not.
And you get paid to create content at Fox News. Isn't that correct?
I get paid to speak the truth.
So you create content. At Fox News, don't you? Giving your view on things? That's content creation, isn't it?
What I do is I speak the facts and I speak the truth based on my experience at the FBI.
And you get paid to do that?
I get paid to speak facts and I get
And are you
paid
on
to
the
speak
clock?
the truth.
Are you on the clock right now?
Am I on the clock right now?
Yeah.
No.
You're not getting paid right now for being a lobbyist?
No, sir. I'm not getting paid to be a lobbyist.
Or for any other purpose?
Excuse me?
You're not getting paid as you sit here right now to be here?
I am not getting paid to be here. No, I am not,
All right,
sir.
fair enough. Mr. Whitson, you also served as an FBI agent before falling into a very lucrative position as the legal director at the Foundation for Government Accountability, correct?
That was my former position, yes.
And well, what is your current position now?
So I currently serve as the Senior Director of Federal Affairs.
And it's a pretty lucrative upgrade from where you first started.
The position I'm in now?
Yeah,
is-
you're making more money now than you were when you first started, right?
Yes.
And would it surprise you to know that your funding between 2013 and 2022, 6 conservative foundations tied to billionaire donors sunk $44 million into your organization, correct?
I don't know the precise
You don't
numbers,
know that? It wouldn't surprise you, though.
but that wouldn't surprise me at all.
And your largest known source of funding between 2013 and 2022 was a foundation controlled by Illinois billionaire Dick Uihlein, who invested over $18 million into your operation. And another source of your funding was the 85 Fund, which gave you $2 million between 2013 and 2022. It is among the network that is controlled by Leonard Leo, who received over $1 billion in contributions from a single billionaire to fund his continued takeover of our court system. And so you get paid to promote an agenda which includes rolling back child labor laws and stripping child workplace protections. Isn't that correct?
No, that's not correct.
And your organization has also worked to stop Medicaid expansion and to slash food stamps, correct?
What do you mean by slash food stamps?
Well, that means cut food stamps, cut the money. And y'all have been advocating for that. And you also were among the organizations that wrote the notorious Project 2025, which is the radical right-wing agenda, the blueprint that President Trump is implementing along with co-president Musk, correct?
I'm not aware of us writing anything in Project 2025.
Now, Mr. Stout, your organization must be brand new because I haven't been able to come up with anything on Reform the Bureau, which is the name of your outfit, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
You just started it?
I started in December.
And have you been successful at recruiting any billionaire donors for your efforts?
No, sir, I haven't. It's a grassroots level.
So if I had more time, I would ask Dr. Hunt a question because he's the only non-paid individual up here not promoting a right-wing agenda, but I've run out of time. So, gosh, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and I will now recognize, just a word before that, probably most of the people who appear before us have to make a living somehow. That's okay. We all get paid salaries or whatever. Not unusual, not scary. With that being said, I will recognize the gentleman from Missouri for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the witnesses for coming here to testify today. Ms. Parker, thank you for your testimony. In your testimony, you relate the misuse by the FBI of SWAT resources, and you give the example of a nonviolent first-time January 6th offenders, one SWAT team spending overnight in a hotel 4.5 hours away to arrest grandparents in their late 70s. Sound like some dangerous hombres to me. On September 23rd, 2022, we're all familiar with the case of a pro-life activist and homeschool father of 7, Mark Houck's. No criminal record. He was arrested in a SWAT raid, guns drawn in front of his family. Then there's 73-year-old pro-life activist Chester Gallagher, who was arrested for nonviolent violation of the FACE Act. And then there was pro-life activist Paul Vaughn arrested in an early morning raid by the FBI, guns drawn in front of his 7 children. Sound like some really dangerous offenders to me. But pro-lifers aren't the only ones who have been targeted by the Biden FBI. Vanessa Savage, a nurse at Texas Children's Hospital, read the story of whistleblower Ethan Heim, who we're familiar with, who exposed gender transition procedures being done at Texas Children's Hospital, despite the hospital having proclaimed that they were no longer doing those procedures because the Attorney General of Texas was investigating that clinic for child abuse. Vanessa stepped forward and basically confirmed Dr. Heim's story. She was then visited 2 months later by the FBI. And then, of course, the anti-Catholic memorandum that we're familiar with. I have that here in my hand right now. Just some simple questions. First of all, this is labeled as a domain perspective. Ms. Parker, what is a domain perspective?
That's a document that, from my understanding, was distributed within the FBI as intelligence. Someone formulated that document, and it was published internally, and it had a stamp of intelligence on it that was signed off by multiple individuals within the Richmond field office.
And part of that memorandum, first page, says, quote, FBI Richmond makes this assessment with high confidence based on FBI investigations, local law enforcement agency reporting, and liaison reporting with various degrees of corroboration and access. I mean, what does the term, high confidence mean to you, Ms. Parker?
When I hear high confidence, I want to believe that it's trustworthy, that I can count on that is factual, that is truth. And my understanding of that memorandum is that they use sources that would not typically be used to gather intelligence. And what was happening at the FBI quite frequently and was disturbing to many is that there were individuals taking their personal views, packaging it up, and creating a document and then stamping intelligence on it and distributing as if it was truth, as if it was almost the Bible. And that is an example of, abuse of your law enforcement power. You're allowed to have your own personal and political opinions, but when you go to work, you've got to leave those at the front door, and you have to exercise in an unbiased and fair manner and be truthful. And when you're getting an intelligence document, you want to hope that it is factually correct and it is true. And unfortunately, that was a document that Christopher Wray had to have rescinded because it was not accurate, and he found it mind-boggling and disgusting that it had ever been published.
Well, one thing I find mind-boggling, first of all, I am Catholic myself. I'm not a traditional Latin Mass Catholic. Often such people who prefer to go to the Latin Mass are referred to as traditionalist Catholics. And then so-called rad-trad or radical traditionalist Catholics are those who only go to Catholic Mass, who some of them believe that the regular English Mass is invalid or reject Vatican II or what have you. But not a single one of them I know even own guns, much less are they radicals or whatever. And then when I look at this memorandum, I see they're quoting the Southern Poverty Law Center, a viciously political defamatory group. I've worked a lot on immigration issues. I think Southern Poverty Law Center has declared every immigration reform group to be a racist or white supremacist group. They're just a walking defamation factory. Have you seen the Southern Poverty Law Center quoted in other FBI memos over the years?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not. But again, that was entirely inappropriate and never should have happened. And the FBI had to walk that back. But again, that is an example of weaponization. That is social weaponization at the FBI. It's entirely inappropriate, and it never should have happened.
The FBI not going after bad guys, but going after enemies of the political regime. Third world stuff. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. By the way, the director of the FBI had to apologize for that. It's not a debunked theory. With that being said, I will recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Raskin.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. One of our colleagues referred to the weaponization of the DOJ and specifically focused on the January 6th defendants. That startled me because 140 American police officers were violently assaulted on that day, wounded, hospitalized, some of them disfigured, disabled, forced to leave police work. But he said that there would have been a better use of FBI and prosecutorial and investigative resources, and I wonder what he was referring to. And in any event, Dr. Hunt, do you agree with that assessment?
Thank you for that question. January 6th shocked and horrified me. That was a shameful day, not least because of the many attacks on our law enforcement officers. So any suggestion that that is a low priority and should not be investigated is shocking to me. I can't imagine a more important devotion of resources by the FBI to anyone who would attack our nation's capital.
Some of our colleagues have again been going back to the idea that the Biden FBI was converted into some kind of political instrument. When I look at the prosecutions that come out of it, I'm thinking about the one of Senator Bob Menendez from New Jersey, who's a Democrat, of Henry Cuellar, who's a Democrat, lots of other Democrats. Other than Donald Trump, I really can't think of any others on the Republican side, and I'm just getting the feeling that they think Donald Trump really should be above and beyond the law, and that's what this whole weaponization thing is about, other than setting the conditions to turn it into an instrument of revenge and retribution, as Donald Trump has promised. Do you think the FBI was acting as an instrument of partisanship in the last administration?
I can only speak from my personal experience, and I can say this. When I was an FBI agent, the men and women that I worked with, they based their investigations on facts and law. They based their investigations on predication. The worry I have is with respect to corruption today. When there's selective enforcement, and just as a regular American citizen, I'm not an insider now, when I see a high-level politician and charges are dropped, and there's no reason, I as an American citizen don't understand why that's the case.
You're referring to Mayor Adams.
That's correct.
But there was a reason, which was he agreed to play on Donald Trump's political team, and the very Republican, conservative U.S. attorney for the Southern District said nothing had changed in terms of the facts of the case, nothing had changed in terms of the law, nothing changed in terms of the evidence. All that had changed was that he'd made this political alignment with Donald Trump. She resigned rather than participate in that corrupt bargain, as did her deputy, who said it would take a fool or a coward to accept that deal. He also clerked for a conservative Supreme Court justice and was active in the Federalist Society. And 5 other lawyers dropped out rather than do it until finally they had to force somebody to do it from D.C. who said he'd be willing to do it because he was about to leave his job. You say let's base it on the facts. And I'm really curious about this Signal group chat thing because the country's in an uproar about the fact that the most precious national security information was shared on a Signal group chat where a journalist was actually invited in accidentally by somebody to participate. And some of my colleagues seem to say, well, it was a one-shot deal. Let's just let it go. And it's no big deal. The FBI director's already said, no, nothing to see there. If this were a standard practice, just yes or no, do you think it would be a problem?
That would be a problem, yes.
Ms. Parker, do you agree it would be a problem if it were a standard practice?
My understanding, I was not on the Signal chat. I just know it.
Just yes or no,
probably
because
similar to
I've got
you.
little time. If you can't answer.
A mistake was made, and
Okay,
people have
Mr.
taken
Stout, can you
ownership.
say, would it be a problem for it to be standard practice to conduct sensitive foreign policy on a Signal chat group?
Yes, I would.
Okay, and Mr. Whitson, do you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it just came out like 10 minutes ago. Waltz's team set up at least 20 Signal group chats for crises across the world. So it was, as one might expect, a very standard practice with Mr. Waltz, and I'm sure this will raise the question of whether or not he really should continue in that position. But do you think that the FBI should investigate what the national security implications and what the public safety implications are of his having done that, Dr. Hunt?
So this comes back to the rule of law. As an FBI agent, there were strict rules about sensitive material. We had to be in a SCIF. We had to take the utmost caution. So to treat other people that are more powerful differently definitely suggests to me a deviation from the rule of law.
All right, thank you, and I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank the gentleman. You know, there's a difference between a mistake and purposeful perpetrated policies
Chair.
are wrong.
Just point out, okay.
I beat you to it. I recognize the chairman of the whole committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Whitson, before you got what Mr. Johnson described as high-paying job as Senior Director of Federal Affairs Foundation for Government Accountability, you worked in the FBI, is that right?
Yes.
10 years in the FBI?
Yes.
And prior to that, you were in the United States Army?
Yes, sir.
300 combat missions in Iraq, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And your time at the FBI, you were special agent in the Directorate, supervisory special agent in the Directorate of Intelligence. Is that accurate?
Yes, Chairman.
In your testimony, and I just want to get you familiar with this subject matter, in your testimony you said one of the ways we can eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse is including the overspending on confidential human sources. You said
Yes.
that in your testimony, right?
Yes, Chairman.
Are you familiar with the Inspector General's report about the confidential human sources who were there on January 6, 2021 here at the Capitol? Have you read the report?
I haven't read that closely.
Well, let me tell you a few things that they say in there, and I want to ask you a few questions. He said there were 26 confidential human sources there at the Capitol that day. Does that surprise you?
No.
Doesn't surprise you. Okay. He said 17 of those 26 confidential human sources entered restricted space they weren't allowed to go into. Does that surprise you?
No.
Doesn't surprise you. They did things they weren't allowed to do.
Well, I need more details
Okay.
about, so were they doing it on their own? Were they told to do it? Were they, that kind of thing?
We want to know the answers to those questions too.
Yes, sir.
4 of them went inside the Capitol, and 2 of the 4 who went inside the Capitol were specifically asked by the FBI to be there that day for this. Does that surprise you?
Not necessarily,
Not necessarily.
but I need to know more facts.
And does it surprise you that any of them, none of these individuals, to our knowledge, were charged with anything?
No, I mean, if they were tasked to be there.
Okay.
I would need more information.
Okay, well,
I'm
in
sorry.
your testimony, you talked about overspending on confidential human sources. Do you believe, is it likely these 26 were being paid by the FBI at the time they were doing this?
I think that's, if they are a confidential human source that's actually on the books, then it's highly likely that they were
Highly
paid.
likely they're being paid.
If they were tasked to do that.
Even if they weren't specifically asked to be there that day? You think there's likely they were paid?
So if they weren't asked to be there, I think usually they're giving us like a lump payment periodically, so it wouldn't be for a specific tasking necessarily. It'd be hard to answer that.
Are you familiar with what was released here earlier this week, the text communications between FBI agents regarding October 14th, 2020 New York Post story on the Hunter Biden laptop? Have you had a chance to review those?
I haven't seen those text messages.
Well, let me just read a couple to you here. It says, nobody on the call is authorized to comment on the New York Post story. Twitter is treating this as disinformation. I just want to read something that took place earlier that day. The way this day worked is the story came out. That day, Elvis Chan, a guy with the FBI, is meeting with the tech company, something he did on a regular basis in the run-up to the 2020 presidential election. At that meeting, someone asked, hey, there's this New York Post story. Is the laptop real? And we know this took place because we deposed Mr. Brady Olson, and he gave us this information. And he said when that question was asked, the response was, yes, the laptop is real. Then we get these text messages, which we didn't have before, we just got them this week, these text messages which relate what happens after that. So the FBI has confirmed to Twitter at a FITF meeting on October 14th that the laptop is real. And then we have these text messages back and forth where they says no one is authorized to comment further. Twitter is treating this as disinformation. You find that troubling that the FBI knew something was real, confirmed it at a meeting, then changed their story and went to no comment, no further comment, and allowed the tech companies to run with the idea that this story was disinformation?
Yeah, I do think that's problematic, and I do think the relationships that they tried to build with members of the FBI with these other organizations were problematic.
Yeah, and the ranking member said, oh, the Republicans want to say the FBI was political, and what really wasn't the case. If this is not political, I do not know what is, because this was the whole basis for the 51 former intel officials doing their letter. And the FBI knew. Now we have written evidence they knew, coupled with the deposition we took before where they admitted this. And then later in the day when they're meeting with other tech companies, they go with no comment. And they even admit here Twitter is running with the disinformation story. Even before the 51 intel officials come out with their letter, which is baloney, they're running with that. And the FBI was part of fostering and promoting that story.
Yeah. It's unacceptable.
Totally unacceptable.
And it shows how one bad apple, and were probably others, but you can see how much of a problem that is. And that one bad apple behaves that way, the entire Bureau's reputation is impacted. Trust is lost across the country. And so that's why it's so important to find folks like that, going back to the entrenched bureaucrats. You have to find them and remove them, because that's all it takes is one bad apple.
I think that was point one in your testimony, which is exactly what Ms. Bondi and Mr. Patel are doing, is getting rid of those individuals who foster this kind of political environment where you're going after your political foes, where you're telling things, saying things, allowing things to be believed that aren't accurate when you knew the truth all along.
That's right. True.
I yield back.
Thank the chairman. I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Jasmine Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I first just want to begin with a news alert. Guess what? Joe Biden is not the president anymore. So maybe we can move on. Maybe we can move into the present, because it seems like we are living in the past. And listen, these are not the good old days, you know, like you used to sit around and your grandparents would talk to you about what used to happen. What we need to be talking about is how we are going to legislate, because I think that some of my colleagues have confused what our jobs are. And I get that we're sitting in Judiciary. And so it may seem as if we are here to be litigators, but we are here to be legislators, which means that we are supposed to be writing laws, not trying to have our own trials and determine whether or not something is true or not, or whatever the case is, or who should be sued, who shouldn't be sued. All I know is that a great American hero, a good senator out of New Jersey, said something to the effect yesterday as he was shattering the record for holding the floor, a record that had been held by another racist in this country.